Hello, fellow Megatenists. Welcome to the Velvet Room. Sorry for the delay. My name is Larrue. I wanted to talk about the Velvet Room because it's got a storied history. There's plenty of things about it that we just don't know, but I did find out enough to really just create an overview, at least the most in-depth overview so far. If I find more information, obviously I'm going to remake this video. I wanted to answer some of the questions. What is it? Why is it? How is it? In modern Persona, there is a general answer, but it's super literal. The Velvet Room is a place that exists between dream and reality, mind and matter. It is a room that only those who are bound by a contract may enter. It may be that such a fate awaits you in the near future. That's all well and good, but it doesn't really explain very much. That line is pretty much said in most of the games since Persona 1. But a lot of things about the room is a bit of a mystery. Why does it exist? How does it exist? Who made it? What inspired it? And who can enter the room? I mean, we can answer some of those questions. So let's get to the bottom of the Velvet Room. Also called the Blue Room, it's integral to the Persona series, performing the function of housing Persona Fusion and the Compendium, among other functions that come and go depending on the entry it appears in. In Persona 1 and 2, all party members can enter the room, but from Persona 3 and afterwards, only the main character basically can enter, though there are some exceptions, but these kinds of things only happen in certain situations. This also applies to Persona 1 and 2, where it seems Persona users can bring randoms into the room, based on some NPC conversations that lead me to believe that, well, some NPCs might have gone to the Velvet Room, or at least just know that it exists. According to the Persona Club book, the only people who can enter the room are Persona users, but later, that's changed to have more specificity, limiting it to basically just the wildcard holders. Let's talk about its various designs. In Persona 1 and 2, it's a jazz bar. In Persona 3, it's a vintage retro elevator. In Persona 4, it's a limousine. In Persona 5, it's a circular prison. In Persona Q, it's a school festival booth. In Persona Q2, it's a preview room for a movie theater. And in the Persona dancing games, it's a dance club. The reason the room can change is canonically because it's meant to reflect the state of mind of the person who visits it. And it can change depending on who visits it and what their intent is. It's kind of meant to reflect the themes as well as just the core values of the person. Also, there is just one Velvet Room. And actually in the first game, the Velvet Room's door, at least the entrance door, was brown, but that was later changed to blue in subsequent games. The people we've encountered in the Velvet Room are numerous, so we gotta get through talking about all of them. Igor is one of the main characters of the Velvet Room lore. He appears in all the games, except some of the spin-offs, as the Master of the Room, or the Caretaker of the Room. Igor looks like a lanky old man with bloodshot eyes. And although he looks like a creepy old weird guy, he's actually a creepy old weird creature created by someone, potentially Victor. He serves his master, Philemon, the master of the gap between consciousness and unconsciousness. Igor is canonically Dr. Frankenstein's assistant, or at least was at some time. This is really integral lore to the Persona Devil Summoner connection, so I'm going to explain it a little bit. Frankenstein does actually exist within Persona, and his name is Victor Frankenstein. And that is the Victor from the Devil Summoner series. So to talk about Victor a little bit more, in the Soul Hiker's 25th anniversary book, we actually learned that Victor learned to fuse because he turned himself into a Dhampir, meaning he consumed vampire blood. He did this to extend his life, and he spent over 200 years studying alchemy. This is how he created the demonic fusion process. Using alchemy as the base, he learned that by deconstructing demons into their lowest particles, their atomic state, he could then mix them up and fuse them to create a new creature. Victor is also very fascinated with the idea of creating life. In the Raito games, we learned that yes, he did create the monster, Frankenstein's monster. And we also learned that he's created characters such as Mary from Soul Hackers. And it's important because he created Igor, most likely. There is no hardline mention that it was indeed Victor that created Igor, but the reason why I mention it though is because they talk about Victor when they're talking about who Igor serves. They also bring up the fact that someone created Igor, but when they're talking about the someone, they don't mention the name, while in a previous sentence they're talking about Philemon. So basically they're trying to imply that someone besides Philemon created him. And that makes it pretty believable that it's Victor that created him. Furthermore, that would tie into the whole idea that Igor created his attendants, which he did. And probably the reason why he's able to do that is because he learned it from Victor. This also would explain how or why Igor is so knowledgeable about demons and fusions. Igor really only supports Persona users because he was directed to by Philemon though. And over the years, he's kind of awakened himself, which led to him leaving Philemon and deciding to live independently as the master of the Velvet Room. It's also implied that Philemon perhaps created the Velvet Room for Igor, or that Igor discovered it. The way the Persona World Guidance describes Igor's creation is that he was a doll that was made by someone, which again harkens back to Mary from Soul Hackers. I thought it was really interesting that in the Persona Club book, Igor is described as summoning demons from the demon world using a phone-like object called the Evil Horn and spell cards. This is interesting because after he stops using the Evil Horn, he basically only fuses Persona. It's a little bit of a distinction, but it's important to note. Talking about the Evil Horn, it's a mobile phone that Igor uses. It's got a skull-like design, but it was intentionally designed to have a silhouette of a penis. The spell cards have phone numbers on the back, by the way. That's how he calls them. If he's using more than one card for fusion, he actually calls both numbers very quickly. Lightning fast, according to Kaneko. In Persona 2, Persona are summoned through a combo of tarot cards and the Evil Horn, Belladonna singing, and Nameless. Now let's talk about Philemon. In Persona World Guidance, they describe Philemon as the figure Carl Jung saw in a dream way back in 1913. He personified wisdom. Here's what Jung had to say about the whole situation. There was a blue sky, like a sea, covered not by cloud, but by flat brown clods of earth. It looked as if the clouds were breaking apart, and the blue water of the sea was becoming visible between them, but the water was the blue sky. Suddenly, there appeared from the right a winged being sailing across the sky. I saw that it was an old man with horns of a bull. He held a bunch of 4 keys, one of which he clutched as if he were about to open a lock. He had the wings of a kingfisher, with its characteristic colors. Since I did not understand this dreamlike image, in order to impress it upon my memory. During the days when I was occupied with the painting, I found in my garden, by the lakeshore, a dead kingfisher. I was thunderstruck, for kingfishers were quite rare in the vicinity of Zurich, and I have never since found a dead one. The body was recently dead at the most, 2 or 3 days, and showed no external injuries. Philemon and other figures of my fantasies brought home to me the crucial insight that there are things in the psyche which I do not produce, but which produce themselves, and have their own life. Philemon represented a force which was not myself. His design in Persona is that of a guy with a butterfly mask. What's underneath the mask is dependent on the person viewing it. What I mean by that is, in one version of the P2 EP ending, if you choose to hit Philemon, you'll see dun dun dun, that he looks like Tatsuya! But in Persona 1, he's designed to look like a Chinese philosopher, or, generally, a handsome Chinese man in his 40s, according to Cosmo Kaneko himself. Philemon lives on an entirely different plane of existence, so he can appear however he wants while he's in that plane. He can look into the hearts of people and is adept at quantum mechanics. Funny side note, apparently Japanese fans thought his name was meant to be Pheromone. Hubba hubba. Philemon resides in the Araya Shrine, which gets its name from Yogacara Buddhism and refers to the type of consciousness that deals in a person's potential existential energy, physically and mentally. This cave of Araya is where the will of all humans living in the world was born. It's the sea of consciousness where intention that cannot be seen take clear form. This will manifests as human beings in a fetal position, holding their knees and floating in space. Because humans have 2 minds, the conscious and the unconscious, it's often said that the physical world is the conscious world, whereas figures such as Gnarly exist in the unconscious, watching everything. And again, Philemon resides somewhere in between. That in between is also where the Velvet Room is located, which is why it's assumed that he probably created it. This is also why the sleep state or near sleep is associated with the Velvet Room, or traversing to the Velvet Room, because that's where your consciousness and unconsciousness kind of meet. There's also 3 other people worth mentioning before we talk about modern Persona Velvet Room attendants. The Demon Painter. Obviously, this is Cosmo Kaneko. I shouldn't have to explain who he is. I have a whole playlist of just content about Cosmo Kaneko, so just watch anything from that. The way his character is described, though, is a painter who's known as the painter of gods and demons. He entered the Velvet Room by painting a blue door on a canvas. After entering it, he just decided to stay. He spends the rest of his existence drawing. Which reminds me, the original design of the Velvet Room was inspired by the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks. Only they used blue instead of red, but many of the visual design choices are directly referencing the Black Lodge. However, the blue color is a reference to another Lynchian project, Blue Velvet. Oh, hey, that's where the name Velvet Room came from, at least according to Kaneko. There's also the singer of the aria. That's Belladonna. You might be asking, why is she singing? And the answer is quite simple. Her singing is essential for summoning Persona, as it has a calming effect on the spirit of the Persona user. Belladonna closes her ears so she can hear only her inner voice and no other noise. So she just is really good at singing, and that's how she just keeps matching up with her accompaniment. The Velvet Room does have a piano player, Nanashi. Or you can call him Nameless, but he's Nanashi to Nana me. Belladonna sings along to his piano, even though she can't hear it. The melody he plays comes from within, and so he keeps his eyes closed and devotes all his attention to only the eyes of his heart, which he uses to see the world. The main theme of the Velvet Room is an original song created by Shoji Meguro for the first game's credits. But prior to Persona 3, the Velvet Room also used other classical compositions. So now we can kind of just disregard a lot of what I just said, because in Persona 3, the rules and logic changed just a wee bit. So, important to note, Philemon still exists, but now he's a quiet observer rather than directly interacting with the protagonist. He's seen as a blue butterfly in Persona 3 and 4. However, in the older games, he's represented as a yellow butterfly. The reason for the butterfly is tied to the poem from the ancient Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi. He's also a butterfly because Philemon has this neat little role where he cannot assume human form outside of his realm. The butterfly itself is also a symbol of change and evolution, so a Persona user seeing the butterfly is recognition of growth that will soon occur. With Persona 3, the new rule is the Velvet Room is only accessible to those with the Wildcard Ability, with some exception. Also, it's not like Nanashi and Belladonna are gone, because in an interview for Double Jump, the strategy guide for Persona 4, a fan asked, whatever happened to Belladonna and Nanashi? Will we ever see the return of Philemon? And we don't know who said this, but an unnamed Atlas staff replied, Igor mentions this in Persona 4, but the appearance of the Velvet Room, the size, the decor, the number of residents, and so on, is different according to each visitor's mentality. Margaret was selected for Persona 4's protagonist. It's not as if Belladonna and Nanashi have disappeared. As for Philemon, he does exist in the Persona 3 and 4 world, he just doesn't make an outright appearance. You can catch a glimpse of him as the butterfly in the intro of Persona 3 and the save points of Persona 4, to show that he is secretly watching over the protagonists. It's also important to state the attendants, for the most part, are non-human beings whose body and souls were created by Igor. Margaret was first created, then Elizabeth, then Theodore, then Lavenza, who, spoiler alert, is Caroline and Justine. Just like Igor, they contemplate who they are and their humanity. After Persona 2, the Velvet Room developed theming. In Persona 3, it was imagined as an elevator to mirror Tartarus, which was a tower. Because of this, Elizabeth is dressed as an elevator attendant, and in Persona 3 Portable, Theodore is dressed as a porter. The elevator being a symbol of the journey, and if you're careful, you might notice that it's always going up, hinting at the events to come. For Persona 4, the Velvet Room looks like a limousine. Igor in this is meant to represent a wealthy man, and Margaret is meant to be his lovely assistant. And Marie is just there. Although not a traditional attendant, some, if not all of her clothes are taken from Margaret. We know for sure that the bag and hat are Margaret's bag and hat. Her outfit is also meant to contrast the high-class luxury of Persona 4's Velvet Room, and this Velvet Room basically just ties together the theming of Persona 4, because we get this very common imagery of celebrity, making their way to the red carpet in a limousine. It also ties together the theming of the wealth disparity and how June-S is really crushing this small town because their Walmart is really ruining all the businesses around them. So Elizabeth appears kind of emotionless in the beginning when you first meet her in Persona 3, but she's got a playful personality. After the events of Persona 3, she leaves the Velvet Room. Through beating Margaret in her challenge, she reveals that Elizabeth left in order to find a way to free the soul of the protagonist from Persona 3 from the Seal of Nyx. She also is implied to be not as strong as Margaret, at least during the time of Persona 4 Golden, based on some of the dialogue during that fight when you fight Margaret. Elizabeth's story continues through the arena games, and she realizes that she needs to create her own bonds. This kind of explains what the wildcard is. The wildcard thing has a canonical reason for being epic, besides it being the reason you can swap persona. The wildcard strength is actually based on the bonds you form, so every single social link or confidant builds it up. So yes, the wildcard is quite literally the power of friendship. When she realizes this, she gains the Fool Arcana. And just a funny little aside, that basically just screams give her her own game, She kind of also develops this weird Goku-type love of fighting and feats of power. During the events of Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, they do this weird power moment where Elizabeth says that her journey is just beginning. Yeah, journey. And Margaret muses that when Elizabeth returns, she won't return to the room as an attendant, but she'll return to the room as someone with a contract. Woo! Okay, so just a heads up, every attendant after Elizabeth is really boring by comparison, but let me explain them anyway. Theodore is a serious and often bullied little boy. He's the younger sibling between him, Margaret, and Elizabeth. He's smart, but he can be naive, and can apparently sense the exact temperature of something by simply touching it. The only other notable thing about him is that he ate dog food one time. Margaret is a mature sibling. She's the oldest, but she can have that quirky little humor that Elizabeth has, sometimes. She's also kind of stoic, and in her optional boss fight, she does use handsome persona men as her persona. She does offer to pull an Elizabeth for you though, where she says that, if you get trapped in a seal or something, maybe she'll do something about it. Though that doesn't happen, so. Marie is a weird one. Marie is the name that Margaret gives this amnesiac poet girl because, she doesn't know who she is. She's kind of just inducted to become a resident's apprentice, but she's actually Kusumi Okami. She was born from the Sea of Souls and had decided she wanted to protect people and fulfill their wishes. She is given a comb by Izanami, which is considered a terrible, gift idea, at least in Japan, because the word for comb is kushi, which can be translated as two different things. Comb, or painful death. She survives and becomes Mariko Kusumi, and functions as a local weather forecaster. But since she controls the weather, all she's really doing is just kind of telling you what she's decided the weather's gonna be. Next are the twins from Persona 5, Caroline and Justine. Justine is the one with the braid, and Caroline is the bunhead girl. They are the guards of the Velvet Room. However, they aren't legit, as they were originally Lavenza, and she was meant to be the attendant for the protagonist. Yes, so the idea is these attendants are chosen to be complementary to the protagonist. You get this mopey emo kid and he gets like the manic pixie dream girl. You get this stud guy, and then you get this like woman. I don't know what she's supposed to be. You get the quirky girl and you get the dumb himbo, I guess. And then you get the brave protagonist from Persona 5 and he gets a little girl, which I don't know what that means. Anyway, Lavenza was actually the blue butterfly in Persona 5. So if you're wondering why I didn't say Philemon was in Persona 5, it's because he's not. Not really, because Lavenza is the butterfly in Persona 5. That's why the butterfly looks different too, if you didn't notice. However, Lavenza does have a headband that has the butterfly, which is meant to be a direct reference to Philemon. Lavenza's design is also supposed to be a maid, which kind of implies that the jail is not really what it's supposed to be, because I don't think maids are a common sight in jails. So we don't really know what was initially intended to be the Velvet Room for Persona 5 because it was distorted. But who knows? Maybe it is a jail. Maybe maids do jail be in. I don't know. Let me know. Any jailbirds in the comment section, let me know. The last thing worth mentioning is Morgana, who is in fact a being created by Igor to help him. So Morgana was made to find the trickster to defeat the evil being that was taking over the spiritual world. It's interesting to say that Morgana is made up from the hope of mankind, which kind of might be a clue to how the other attendants are made, I guess. I'm not sure. Morgana also has Velvet Room blue eyes. Maybe there's this thing of like ingredients, not unlike the Powerpuff Girls. Hope, spice, everything nice. And that's pretty much all the solid information. We still have many unanswered questions. Why do they have gray, white hair? Why do they have yellow eyes? I wanted to get solid evidence for like an explanation for that, because yellow eyes in Mega 10 is usually a thing of you're not truly human. And that makes sense because, well, they aren't human, but they do ponder their humanity just like Igor does. So, I mean, maybe that's it. You know, I'm just kind of spitballing. I kind of expected there to be more information. I read so much things for this video, and surprise, surprise, the Velvet Room lore is kind of thin. But all that being said, there's definitely room for growing the lore. Maybe they could explore it more if they wanted to. We do know that Igor is always going to be there, by the way. I found in an interview for Persona 5, they did mention that Igor will be in the games, like he's a tenant. So if you're afraid that Igor is going to be gone because the original voice actor passed away, they're probably going to do something. Who knows? Maybe they'll do an AI voice for it or something. Okay, thanks to my channel members, T, Carmageddon, FF12 Kid, and A Lie Remains a Lie. I hope to get that SMT5 video out before the end of this month. That remains to be seen because it's also my birthday month, and you know, I'm gonna party like it's 1979. Alright, thanks for watching, and goodbye, fellow Megatenists.